Planning is the other.
What?
Planning board is the other one on
Oh,
there.
thanks.
All right. Good evening. First, we want to just check in with the folks in the audience and see if anyone is recording tonight's meeting. All right, great. And do we have anyone in the audience that would like to make comments in front of the board tonight? All right. All right, that brings us to Angelina and our student representative report. Good evening, Angelina.
Good evening. I'm very excited for this report because we have a few things to update. For one, this past Saturday on October 15th, my fellow student council officer, Tiana Gressel, and I attended the Massachusetts Association for Student Representatives Delegates Assembly in Marlborough. Tiana and I joined student representatives of school committees across the state to come together and collaborate about being a student representative and how to further our involvement in our local school committees and how to better represent the student bodies. During the conference, we attended workshops on various subjects that are essential to the success of a student representative. Some of those were defining student achievement, networking and communications, turning ideas into action, and improving diversity, equity, and inclusion. As a new student representative on this committee, I found these workshops to be very insightful, and they gave me some ideas on how to better connect with Murdoch's student body, and how to work with my fellow school committee members on addressing the ideas of the students. One of the most exciting aspects of this program, in my opinion, is the efforts to make legislative change in schools across the state level. For the second portion of the conference, the delegates met and voted on proposed resolutions to the state legislative body. The resolutions including developing a more inclusive curriculum reform, more accessible transportation costs for transporting students to and from school, and also allowing student representatives on school committees in Massachusetts to have votes on issues. Tiana and I plan on continuing our participation in the Mazur organization, and we're really excited to be a part of it. Coming back to this week at Murdoch, make sure to check out our social media pages for images from Spirit Week. Tomorrow is Decades Day, where students and staff can dress up to represent the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Each class will host a booth starting at 6 p.m. at tomorrow night's homecoming game. Kickoff is at 7 p.m., but senior night recognition will take place before them. The semi-formal homecoming dance will be on Saturday night at Toytown Elementary in the cafeteria from 7 to 10 p.m. Tickets are $10 and must be purchased before the end of school tomorrow. In other news, Haunted High School returns to Murdoch on Thursday, October 27th, from 6 to 8 p.m. Admission is $5. This event is open to the public of all ages. The Winchendon Elementary PTO hosts a Monster Ball on Friday, October 28th, starting at 5:30. This event is open to all students up to grade 5. The PTO is looking for donations for their raffle baskets. Please contact your student's school for more information. Murdoch seniors are selling butter braids to help defray the cost of their dues. Items will be delivered November 15th in time for Thanksgiving and winter holidays. See any student to place an order. Student council officers will attend the MASC annual officer shop on Saturday, October 29th at Middleborough High School. Murdoch juniors and seniors will visit UMass Amherst on Monday, November 7th. Field trip forms are available in the guidance office, and space is limited to the first 36 students who will return their forms. This field trip is sponsored by Mount Wachusett Community College Success Academy. The College Success Academy will meet Friday, October 28th with interested students to present their healthcare program opportunities. On October 8th, the Narragansett Murdoch Co-op Marching Band attended the UMass Band Day, where they were joined by over 2,000 other high school band members and the UMass Minutemen. They did a day of rehearsing until their performance during halftime of the football game, where they played renditions of songs from High School Musical. The band members then stayed to watch the UMass Minutemen perform their field show at the end of the game. Dual enrollment students visited Worcester State University last Friday for a campus tour and information session with the admissions counselor. Lunch was provided by the Enrollment Management Office. A FAFSA workshop was held for all seniors on Monday, October 17th, and seniors all created accounts during their advisory workshops today. For sports, field hockey plays at St. Bernard's tomorrow at 3:30. Varsity cheer competes in Billerica on Sunday at 9 a.m. Middle school soccer plays at Tohoto on Monday. Middle school field hockey plays Tuesday versus Gardner at home. Middle school football plays next Thursday at Gardner at 6 p.m. The cross-country team competes on Thursday at Wachusett Regional. And the eSports Super Mario Smash Ultimate competes on Wednesday at 3:30. It was a little long-winded, but that is my update for right now.
Could you repeat that, please?
Do you have any questions, anyone?
Mr. Chair, I don't have a question, but sort of hearkening back to the beginning of your report, we've had some really talented students sitting in that chair over the years, and I'm really wondering if there isn't something we should do or that examine a way for them, the student representative, to have more involvement with the committee itself in certain deliberations on certain topics that may come before us, simply because they offer a perspective that we no longer have, not being in school. And I would like to, I just think it's a waste for talent like that to come here, give a report, and then zip out of here, even though I know they have homework and other responsibilities as well. So I would like to see a discussion at some point, maybe put on the agenda tonight. We probably can't do that. To throw out some ideas on how better to involve the student representative, how the student representative maybe should be chosen. No disrespect to NHS, but there have to be other students out in the student body as well that have legitimate perspectives and enough intelligence to sit on this committee as a student representative. So maybe finding a way to have a student rep elected by the student body or certain classes. But anyway, those are questions just to throw out there, and I'd like to see, I'd like to see us discuss that at some point.
Mr. Chair,
Karen?
just as a suggestion, just because I have seen it done in other districts, and I know that we have a representative on the Board of Ed that is a student representative, and they are part of the discussions of all of the agenda items. So there is a way to do it. They are not a voting member, unfortunately, but they can take part in the discussions and give valuable insight. As far as how they are selected, that's usually, I can ask about that at the Mass Conference too. I think that's a good topic to ask about at the Mass Conference, where we will have insight from many school committees, but just speaking from the experience of both, I know that Boston, we had a very robust student representative each year that took part in all discussions, and we had a report that quarterly from the student council. So the student council would come and give a report, much like we were talking about the CPAC coming and giving for us. So that's something we could think about too. So I second what Greg said. I think that we are wasting the talent of our wonderful students who come, and giving a report is great, but I think that you have so much more insight to give us, and we can learn from you.
Right. Mr. Chair, if I may.
Of course.
Thank you both for your comments on that, and if I could go off the cuff of the report a little bit. I didn't know what I was expecting going into this conference, and I was pleasantly surprised with the students that I met there and like how much I shared their passions. A lot of the main themes that we talked about was how much kids want to be more than a 5-minute report, and how we want to enact change on a legislative level, which is what a lot of these like resolutions that we voted on were for. And from my understanding, like this organization was only formed like 2 years ago by this, I think he's a sophomore in college now. But the basis of the organization is to unite student representatives across the state to work towards legislation that we all feel is necessary that can be implemented on the state level. And I really love the legislative policy change aspect of all these things, so it really inspired me, honestly. And I know that I'm a new member to this committee, but I would really like to be able to fulfill my position to the best that I can. And I think, you know, a lot of the stuff that we talked about with the resolutions and like curriculum reform and transportation costs and like having a vote on school committees, I think these are all really pressing and like important issues that I feel like will better our school and schools across the state. And I would be really open to meeting with all of you, and for any students who might be listening to this, I would love to hear insight on pressing issues that they feel like they need to be addressed, and I'd love to be able to work with students further on that and be able to represent them. But again, I would love to have, like, I'm so excited to be here, like I said the 2 weeks ago, whenever the last meeting was, but no, I'm just really appreciative to be here, and I'm excited to actively participate.
Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you, Angelina. Larry?
So I don't think we need to do anything special, Greg. I think it's already in place. She is a representative, and she can, you know, she can get things on the agenda if there's things that are pressing at the school, or there's issues that are bubbling up at the school and from a student perspective, and she would like to put that on the agenda. She can do that. She can stay for the entire meeting, and she can certainly be a voice and participate in our discussions. That's already in place. So the only thing that she can't do, Angelina, is vote. You wouldn't be able to vote, but you can participate in all the things, and there'll be very important things coming up. You know, budget and policy and lots of things that, appointment of personnel, being involved in selection of that kind of stuff. I'm not sure that, I'm not sure, Ms. Rondo may have a little more information on this, but I'm not sure that the selection process is something that we can get into, because I think there's already a selection process in place. So maybe Ms. Rondo can enlighten us.
Yeah, is it open to anybody that's interested?
Greg, if I may, we would like to invite Ms. Stephanie to speak.
I would like to invite Ms. Rondo to come and speak.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Office of the Student Representative to the School Committee is a function of the Vice President of the school's Student Council. It is in our charter, and the students openly run for that position. Student Council, any student is eligible to participate in Student Council. They have to be a member in good standing in order to run for an office. But in order to be a member in good standing, they just need to attend a minimum of 3 meetings in a row, and they can be declared a member at large. And over the last several years that I have been the advisor, you know, we have had students with varying interest in participating in the length of the school committee meetings and things like that. So, you know, I have had students who have served not only as the school committee rep, but they've done like the Regional Student Advisory Council, and from there have been elected to the State Student Advisory Council. So it really depends on the interest of the student. Like some of them are more interested in the legislative functions of it, you know, and they get a taste of that as well at girls or boys state in their junior year. So that is how we select our school committee representative. And then, additionally, the vice presidents of all the classes are asked to choose a town committee to sit on, whether it's Parks and Rec or the library or, whatever. And again, it really does depend on the kids' interests and their schedules and the other committees' meeting schedules.
Greg?
I guess the only comment that I would have then is, if it was really that simple to get the student rep that involved in the committee, why, and I guess I take some blame for this, having been on the committee for a while myself, why it hasn't happened before now.
So the good news is,
I'm glad to hear that it would be relatively simple to get that involvement and that input.
so Mr. Larry and Ms. Stephanie are correct. The policy and law that exists now authorizes the Student Advisory Council to elect one member with a majority vote to be a member of the school committee. And so Angelina is a member of this school committee. She has full privileges to adjust the agenda. She has full privileges to participate in discussions. As Larry said, the only thing that she can't do is vote. And this year, we have someone with a great deal of interest that has agreed to be a part of our school committee meetings as a full-fledged member. So that will be happening this year. And just like Larry said, nothing to do except thank Angelina for her commitment and look forward to her being the participant that I think Greg was envisioning.
All right.
If I may, I think last week, or 2 weeks ago, Greg, you missed we actually had this conversation on the agenda 2 weeks ago and brought Angelina on as a full member of the school committee just without voting rights. So it is part of Mass General Law, actually, and, as we talked about last couple of weeks ago. So she will be here and participating as a full member for the remainder of this year. So I'm glad you brought it up, and Angelina is extremely excited to participate in this role. We're
All right,
really
well, my
happy to have her,
apologies for
so.
being late to the game.
No.
I just thought it was important to bring it up.
Agreed.
And Mr. Chair, just so you know, Angelina, MASC, which is the Mass Association of School Committees, and I believe in conjunction, Larry can speak to this probably, with the Mass Association of School Superintendents, did have a resolution at one point, I think we're still working on it, to work towards making student representatives voting members, so that is something that with the new group that you're working with to keep in mind, so you might want to make a note of that. I will try and find that resolution for you and try and get it to you if you're interested. Because I know that a couple of years ago, and it might actually be the student that helped form that group, or one of the students, a student stepped down from the Boston School Committee because he didn't have a vote. So I think it is something that's important.
Any questions for Angelina on the information that she shared with us tonight?
You're selling butter braids,
I am selling butter braids.
just so we know who to go to for the school committee members.
I would love to contact all of you about purchasing a butter braid, possibly.
And if, for those of you who have not had the butter braids, they're highly addictive, so, and they are good for up to 6 months if you put them in the freezer, so you can buy a bunch and space it out. I'm trying to help Miss Rondo, too.
Just what I need, one more addiction.
Mr. Chair, I do have one question. So, if I were to want to add an agenda item, what process would I go through to want to do that? And who would I contact?
There's really two ways. One is during our meeting, every meeting, we talk about future agenda items, and anyone is able to place really almost any topic on the agenda at that time. And the other is that outside of the meetings, if suddenly something comes up, or you become aware of something outside the meeting, you just contact me, and we get it added on with the secretary.
Okay,
Just-
thank you.
Mr. Chair, do you get a copy of the agenda?
I haven't at this point, but Mr. Forsyth took my email, so I should be on it from now on.
Okay.
Larry?
I was just gonna say, wondered if she got the agenda. The other thing too is, the chair sets the agenda so that, Dr. Forsythe is the right person to contact. But, if you're on site, he presents the agenda in concert with the superintendent. So if you can't get Dr. Forsythe, you can certainly go through Mr. King, okay?
Yes.
Because they kind of set the agenda together.
Okay. Thank you.
All right,
All right, ready to move on?
move on.
All right, you have...
Thank you, Steph.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. You have minutes in your packet
Yep.
from our last meeting. Yep. And I'm sorry, actually, this is from the,
Previous meeting, September 1st,
September 1st meeting.
actually a couple of meetings ago.
is this September 1st?
Yep. That's what I've
This
got.
is from our last meeting.
Yeah, I think there's a date incorrect on there.
I think it's the 15th, actually, if I'm not mistaken.
Say that one more time.
I believe it's September 15th is the actual date of these minutes.
Yeah. It's not the last committee meeting because it's got me listed as present and I wasn't here last meeting.
No, this is not from 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
All right, so at the top of the minutes, you notice it says September 1st. We're going to, for the time being, assume that that was September 15th, and maybe Liz can check and confirm that before we put these in the records. You'll notice that very close to the end of the meeting, after old business, the video of recording of that meeting did cut out.
Oh,
So the end of the meeting agenda, the meeting minutes are based on notes. So if you do want to take a close look at that, really all it was the executive session, going into the executive session and coming out. And do we happen to have a motion on these minutes for the consent agenda?
Mr. Chair,
Greg,
I'll move to approve.
we have a motion. Do we have a second?
second,
All right, motion and second. Any discussion?
just
change.
encourage the superintendent's office to make the change. So don't forget to make the change of the date.
On the date,
On the date.
we'll
please.
verify and make sure the date's accurate.
All right, thank you.
Other discussion? All right, Greg?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. It's unanimous.
Are you going, Mr. Chair, are you going to hold those till they're corrected?
We just voted them through with the correction.
But are you going to release them, or going to put a hold on them till they're corrected?
I'm going to hold them.
Okay.
All right. Sorry. Let's see. The next item is superintendent's report. And we have a pretty thorough data presentation tonight.
We do. We have, as we kind of spoke about last meeting, we talked about our MCAS data, but we're also doing some more progress monitoring types of work this year that's a little bit different, a little bit new, and we have our leadership team here this evening, so if they would all like to come up. We have Ms. Vazina from the middle school with us. We have Ms. Diaz from Toytown Elementary. We have Ms. Gilson from Memorial, and we have Ms. Rickson from the high school this evening. They'll each be speaking about the data from their individual schools and what they're doing with that progress monitoring data.
So good evening. We are here this evening to look at our STAR data. And as many of you know, last year we were using, and for a few previous years, we were using NWEA, measures of academic progress. And we've actually had the opportunity to move on to a new product, Renaissance STAR, for both reading and math. So,
Excuse me a minute. Can I
Yep.
just interrupt you real quickly?
Absolutely.
Again, maybe this is my pet peeve, but acronyms drive me crazy. And for folks out there that are watching that may have no idea what STAR stands for, can you?
It stands for STAR.
Okay.
It's not an acronym, it's really
Well, I
just the
see
name of
I
it.
see 4 capital letters here, so I'm assuming.
It's STAR.
Okay. Okay.
No, I don't. That's, and we're gonna do, I always remember, right. So just like with measures of academic progress, our MAP assessment, STAR reading and math is very brief. It's a customized assessment, and it goes from grades 1 all the way through 12. It provides our teachers with learning data. These are benchmark assessments that happen 3 times a year. They can also happen 4 times a year if you do it in the summertime. And also allows us to progress monitor throughout the year and see how our students are doing. What's great about the STAR assessments, there are linking studies that are determine the state benchmarks, and how our students score is then correlated to how they would potentially score on MCAS. So if a student scores not meeting standards, then it predicts that if they were to take MCAS at that point on that type of assessment, that's the same category that they would be scoring on. So it gives us a lot of information in a short amount of time. Again, yep,
Jessica, sorry to interrupt again.
yeah.
The word that you used was linking studies. That sounds to me like a study, but what is that really?
So what happens is that they will take how, like normative studies, how a lot of students do on the STAR assessment in Massachusetts, and they can actually link how they perform based on results from MCAS. So they can match how, through a few years of longitudinal data, they can match how students perform on MCAS with how they performed on STAR, thus giving us state benchmarks. Instead of the district saying, well, you need to get to this certain level, we're using the state benchmarks where it says, if you wanted to perform this well on the state test, this is where you need to be. This is where your cutoff is.
So in tonight's presentation, when we see the math and ELA data, it is correlated
To the state benchmarks, correct. Yep. And each of us will go through what that looks like for each of our schools. And again, this is going to be our baseline data. We don't have anything to compare it to at this point. So just like with the measures of academic progress assessment, this is a computer adaptive test. So there's actually, there's several different questions that they can pull from. Again, it's a computer adaptive, so the computer knows more than we do at this point. So if a student's in 7th grade, for example, they'll start off at a 7th grade level. If they get that question correct, then it may go to a little bit higher level. If they get the next question incorrect, it will go down to a different level. It will find their instructional level based on how they answer, whether they answer correctly or incorrectly. And what's great is the software tracks which questions they've already seen, so they won't see that question again within a 120-day window. So really our purpose tonight, showing you this data, is how we're using this information to inform our instruction, and really how each school's efforts are linked to how we're doing it with our district's strategic plan. So many of our schools have already gone through and analyzed this data that we're bringing to you tonight. And many of us are actually getting ready to monitor how students have been progressing with those interventions. What's really great is that this is scientifically proven to help teachers guide students on their unique pathway. And we also have the ability to now focus on student growth and personalizing each of the students' practice through something called Freckle. And that's actually a tool that goes hand in hand with these assessments. This is something that we were missing before with the other assessments that we were using, because unfortunately we didn't have anything to have interim, those middle assessments to progress monitor how students were doing, at least for the higher grade levels. So now we have that opportunity to see how students are doing. We're not waiting until the next benchmark time to see if students are making growth. So we're going to move on to each school, and then we're going to go through just our baseline data and then what we're doing for our interventions.
And of course, because Memorial has the babies, we're a little bit different.
we're not completely using all of STAR. We're using it a little, we're using DIBBLES, which is the dynamic early, indicator of basic early literacy skills. I had to get there.
Thank you.
I know what it is. And this is an assessment we've been using for many years. It is a one-on-one assessment given to all of our students, K1 and 2, and it's measuring all the foundational literacy skills that kids need to become readers. So you can see the scores here. It's shows above benchmark, at benchmark, below benchmark, and well below benchmark, and you can see the different levels from our 3 grade levels at Memorial. Then on the next, you can see that's our baseline data beginning school year. Then on the next page, we do give STAR at 2nd grade because they're readers, and it starts to be a reliable indicator because you really need to be a reader to take the STAR assessment. They do have an early literacy, or an early STAR they call it, but we just felt that the DIBBLES gives us the information we need to progress monitor our students, to assess them and give them the reading instruction that they need. So that's why we're still using DIBBLES. And then we also have the math, and we are using STAR Math at grades 1 and 2. The reason we're using math at grades 1 is because the math assessment actually reads it to the kids. They can put on headphones, so we can actually measure their math ability, not their reading ability to do math. So we have all those assessments, and you can see their scores here.
A quick question. I'm just curious as to how, and maybe I'm just looking at it too simply, how DIBBLES and STAR correlate or relate to each other, because when I look at the DIBBLES, it basically shows well over 1/3 of the students at Memorial below or well below benchmark. And the STAR reading just shows 11% not meeting expectations, which seems like a big difference to me.
Well, you have to go a little bit deeper, and I did. When you look at 2nd grade DIBBLES and STAR comparative, what you don't see is there are about 15 kids that are non-readers in 2nd grade, so they actually couldn't take STAR because they're non-readers, so they don't factor into that. So that's why you'll see they weren't factored into those scores, because you have to be able to answer a certain amount of questions in STAR to be able to even start there. So that score kind of looks skewed because you don't have all of the 2nd graders, whereas if you look at DIBBLES, the number of students taking it is more.
I got you. Okay,
All right?
thank you.
So that's why DIBBLES for us gives us what we need to instruct our kids and give them the skill base they need to become readers.
Okay.
STAR is used for kids that are readers, base readers, right? So that's the distinction.
All right, thank you.
Okay. And so what we're doing is, go ahead.
So this is the first year that you've given STAR to the kids, and some kids couldn't take it because they're not ready.
Right.
All right,
But they had DIBBLES.
but they had DIBBLES.
Yeah, we have DIBBLE scores for
And
them.
it looks, as Greg pointed out, it doesn't look like they did very well on the DIBBLES. So, I'm just curious, this is your baseline data now? And I know you just spent a half day or a day or something going through the data at your schools, is that correct?
Well, yes, but we look at it all the time, so yeah.
Yeah. Have you identified some possibilities for,
That's what I'm literally about to tell you that.
because it's pretty,
I'm about to tell you the overview plan right now.
okay.
Okay. So, and this is just the big overview plan, but I mean, we've drilled it right down to every single child. So
in kindergarten, currently, if you look at our kindergarten DIBELS scores, they're alarming, to say the least. We have about 87% of our kids are in the yellow or red. A lot of them are, they need a lot of help. So all of our kindergarten kids need explicit and consistent teaching with foundational skills. We have a very strong push for phonemic awareness and phonics skills at a tier 1 level. So everyone is getting a lot of skill work with that, but they're also getting some direct instruction with our paras in small groups in the center work every single day, because we have a lot of work to do with our kindergarten class. We knew that coming in based on our kindergarten screening scores in the spring. That wasn't a surprise to us. When we saw our kindergarten screening scores in the spring, our DIBELS scores were not a surprise, but we have a lot of work to do. In first and second grade, we are currently have 94 kids in intervention participating in small group reading support based on the assessment scores. We're not looking at math right now because we really need to focus on our reading support, and hopefully by mid-year, we're gonna do the hard work we need to do now, that then we can focus on math and add in some more math support. So this is our intervention and our IEP work that we're working on. And grade level teams are currently taking common planning time to collaborate and focus on student learning goals to support this work. Both they're doing the intervention pull-out work and classroom push-in work, both for their center work and then their small reading group work. So that's what's happening. There's a lot of hard work going on. Teachers are really focused on the data and how to support kids to get them what they need.
A few years back, I remember getting a presentation to the board here. I think you were the principal then, I don't think you were a superintendent. But we got a presentation from I forgot what her title was, she had a couple of titles. She was the director of special ed, and she was also early childhood, whatever that title was.
Right, Suzanne Michelle.
Yeah, yeah. I wasn't gonna say her name, but, and I remember in that presentation, there was a big movement to reach out to parents, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. Do you remember that, Jess? It was a reading program to reach out.
I can't, Footsteps to Brilliance, I believe is what you're talking
Yeah.
about, yeah.
So the only reason why I bring it up is it looks to me if 67% of our kindergarten kids are so far behind, one reason maybe is because people aren't reading to them at home, or they don't have access to reading materials, or they don't go to the library, or whatever the reason is. But I remember she had come up with an idea to how to reach out.
Footsteps to Brilliance was a push across the state for a literacy program. It was a geofenced literacy access app, and it was around the whole area. It was a granted application, an online thing that the whole central Western Mass had. It was a grant that came across the state. So I don't think it's even around anymore.
Well, I'm not sure that's the same one, because this was gonna reach out, and she was gonna bring people into the school, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, and she was gonna reach out and go to homes and provide them with books and provide them with, and do, I think she had some nights for parents that she was gonna do to help parents with young children and the importance of reading to them, and she had a big plan. It was 3 or 4, maybe 5 years ago now, I don't know. But I just wondered if that was something that we should consider again, if our kids are coming to us so far behind. 67% plus the,
Well, I mean, it really, it's 87%, to be honest with you,
87%.
because we've got, I mean, it's below benchmark too. And it's not just this, there's a language, there's like, it's speaking and listening is really, you know, we need our kids talking and speaking, not just being able to read and identify. So it's a global issue, that we're having. So we've got a lot of work to do. When we looked at last year's beginning of the year Dibbles scores, they were significant like this, but this year's scores are more significant. We literally compared last year's beginning of the year Dibbles scores to this year beginning of the year, and these are more significant. I can't remember exactly the percentage difference, but it's significant. So we've just got work to do.
If I may offer two pieces real quick, relative to kindergarten specifically, and early childhood. So just remember last week with the MCAS presentations that early literacy is a concern across the state. We identified that through MCAS. DESE identified that through MCAS, that early literacy is one of their two major areas of concern. We saw that in our MCAS data in this district, and we see it coming up in our kindergartners and first graders who don't have MCAS data, quite frankly. So DESE is working off of grades 3, 4, and 5. It makes a lot of sense logically that continues on down to our earlier grades. And I think the secondary piece, and I think that Ms. Gilson just sort of touched on it, you know, we looked at least the past 2 years, and over the past 2 years, that this same data was a little bit over 50% were in that red number over the past 2 years. And so I think another piece of this is as well to recognize that we've just brought in that phonics program only a year ago, which is a really important component, and we're sort of a little bit ahead in thinking about addressing that early literacy. You know, recognize it in our own district that it was something that we need. But the other piece is to look at that first grade and second grade data now as well, knowing that over the past 2 years, those students have been at 50% or higher in the red over those years, and that they are making progress. Those have reduced by 50%, if you will, down to, I think, 25% and 24% respectively off the top of my head in those Dibbles pieces. So I think it's a testament to what our teachers do each and every day, especially with that new program. So with the phonics program, they've reduced the kindergartners from last year from 50% to under 25%, I believe, off the top of my head. So you know, I think we're really excited about the work that they're doing, and I think, Mr. Murphy, you're correct. There was that program, and it was a part of Footsteps to Brilliance, where those were brought in, books were distributed. It was, yes. We had a presentation one night. Somebody read the most books or something like that. It's a piece that's not as active as it once was, as Ms. Gilson just mentioned, but we'll be focusing on some of the pre-K and early childhood pieces as well.
So my question would be, how many of the students that are coming in have had early intervention services? Do we know that?
I have not teased out. We've collect the data about, I don't know about early intervention. I do know that we collect whether they've had some kind of early childhood experience, whether it be our preschool or preschool experience or daycare, but I did not sit down and tease out that. I know that we collect it because the state collects it, but I did not look to see who's been in preschool and who has not been in preschool.
Right. Well, I'm not just talking about preschool, because any child can go to preschool, but I'm also talking about early intervention in the sense of children that are referred to early intervention through, for an ITP or
I mean,
or
if you're
such.
asking how many kids are currently on an IEP,
No, not necessarily. So,
but we
prior
know
to an
there
IEP.
might be kids that have had early intervention that graduated out of EI, but we don't know that. You could, because the parents might not have provided us with the information that they had EI until we probed because we had concerns. Or we know that they have EI because they're already on an IEP for whatever reason.
Right.
So there's that information. So I don't have that statistics.
Okay. Well, I'm just thinking that, I mean, if we're having, I'm with Larry that, I mean, yes, I think these numbers are concerning. I think that that's something that when you're doing especially the kindergarten screening, we need to find a way to find out how many students have been a part of EI, how many, however you're screening. I know that you do get that information, but maybe we need to, especially where you are screening them, and I know that you aren't shocked by these scores, but,
Well, not that I'm not shocked, we knew, again, we did screening in May, and so we
Right.
knew what the numbers were like in May. We knew that they were, we knew that we had a lot of kids that were needy. We did
Right.
know that.
but, and
And
knowing.
we had a lot of registrations over the summer and right up until the day before school. And then we had kids that came to school with a lot of needs that we weren't expecting. That,
Right.
That's just it. They come and they're ours, so we take care of them.
And understood, and I just, as an advocate myself, I'm just concerned because for me, this is also speaking to how many, it behooves the question, how many students are being missed in the pediatrician's office because they have a duty to recommend to EI prior to them getting to us. And that may be something that we as a school district need to start thinking about partnering with a school district. And, we can talk to Nicole about, how do we build that relationship outwards? Because, we can have something like great 5 years ago that disappeared, but we need to do something prior to our students coming here and expecting our teachers and our staff to always be the stopgap for fixing everything, because as much as we would like to think that parents are going to be able to do all the things that we would like them to do at home, unfortunately, a lot of these students that come with these issues, the parents may have issues themselves, or, not just that, they may be working 3 jobs, so they may not have the time. So I think that these are things that, we as a school committee not only need to be concerned about the school itself, but we're part of the community. So if there's a way that we can, I'd be happy to work with Nicole. I'll reach out to her tomorrow and talk to her about reaching out to the pediatricians and seeing what we can do with that regard, because I'm very curious about us getting so many. And I think that's a lot of work to put on you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I just ask you, so K1 and 2 are not taking MCAS, so how do we get to these thresholds of the being at benchmark, not being at benchmark if we're not aligned with MCAS scores? What determines where a student falls on this scale?
So these are normed tests that we're told align up to the MCAS. So STAR is aligned to, DIBELS is aligned to, it all aligns up to. That's what we go on. These are considered normed to the grade level standards. So that's why we use them. And they're reliable. I mean, DIBELS has been around for just about ever, it seems. I don't know.
And Mr.
Go
Chair.
ahead.
I can get you the exact verbiage of it, just so that you can see how it's grades 3 and up, and then how it differs for first grade and second grade.
Great,
Well,
that's great.
can I ask, these are also just normed to the curriculum frameworks for the state also, correct?
For
Right,
Massachusetts.
so so regardless of MCAS, even if we didn't have an MCAS, Dr. Forsyth, these would be aligned with the curriculum frameworks per grade. So even if, like, next year they decided to make MCAS Park or come up with a whole new acronym just to confuse Greg, these would align with whatever the curriculum framework per grade level is. So,
And for our purpose, for our grade levels and the linking studies, it is aligned exactly to, I shouldn't say exactly, it is aligned to the verbiage, I guess you could say, for MCAS. So it's still the score that you would get on STAR is linked to the score that you could get on MCAS. And that's how this is, it's much different from the measures of academic progress. We didn't have that predictability as well as this does it. That makes sense.
Toy Town, here we go. So just to speak to that a little bit, when we're focusing on teaching the standards, it's a different conversation, I think. I think we've been really focusing with staff and students on where you are individually and what we can do to help you grow. So this year, in addition to the teachers seeing the students' reports, the students have each seen their individual reports, and the students will get a little lightning bolt that will tell them an area that they need a little bit more help on, and it will also show them areas that they've succeeded in. So with the students and the teachers, the students have been building their own sort of knowledge about why they're in school, what the things are that they need to personally work on, and helping them achieve those goals. And I know that Jessica was just saying about the progress monitoring, how important it is for kids to see their growth. So while we're looking at some numbers here, 33% of our students are meeting or exceeding, and our job is to continuously throughout the year move our students to the left. So we want to make sure that we are paying attention to our students that are not quite where they should be grade level wise, but really supporting them with their individual growth. All right, here's our STAR math, and you'll see that we have, again, 33% of the students here are meeting or exceeding, and we have found that working in small groups, really targeting the areas that students need to work on, and also a big component of the math program now is students are working in small groups and they're playing games. So we're finding a lot of success with students being excited about that work and really engaged in meeting their math goals as well. What are we doing at Toy Town with this information? So currently we have 76 students that are participating in small intervention groups in reading, math, or both. And the way that we've structured the day, they're not missing out on the Tier 1 instruction. They're still in the class, getting the lessons with their peers. Studies have found that students do well to hear those components as well. And then at kind of midpoint in a 90-minute block, students that require extra support are getting that extra support at that time. So small groups are happening. They're still working on the standards that they need to work on in a smaller group. So I've been in a lot of classrooms and watching this transition, and now several weeks into school, it's pretty seamless, and kids are excited to be working in their smaller groups as well as learning with their peers in the larger group. Coming up, we are the week of Halloween. We're going to start with our benchmark in November. So we're excited to hear about the growth that students are experiencing, and happy to talk more about that when we get those scores. We think that it's critical, again, for the kids to revisit what they are doing specifically, and every single student, like all of our teachers this year, are focusing on every student growing, so no matter where they are. We're using the data to inform the intervention groups as well as the classroom small groups. So we have common planning time, and we've been coaching our teachers on how to use this data and really make it important that we're not wasting anybody's time with, it's so critical that while students are there, they're engaged in everything that they're doing. And again, the work that we're doing with the students specifically to set their own goals, I think has been really instrumental in helping them. I just want to mention too, it's not torture when the kids take this assessment at all. It's 20 minutes. So and we really explain to the kids that your test isn't like anyone else's. So when you're working on it, it's a computer-based, like we've been talking about, but when they're working on it, they don't feel like, oh my gosh, why is Mr. Forsythe, Dr. Forsythe done before I am? They don't have that, like it doesn't feel awful for them. They are sort of happy. We're excited with them saying, it's your time to show what you know. This is so exciting. I can't wait to see how much you've learned. And going into it that way, it's not like a really high pressure, high stakes testing that the kids are taking. It's really about them and being comfortable so we can really see where the work needs to be done.
And in the second bullet there, it says you're going to benchmark on October 31st. Isn't this the benchmark?
Yes, we're repeating it. So we can see based on what we've been doing and what we've been putting in so far, because what's going to happen, we think, is certain skills are going to get mastered. So we're not going to keep you in that small intervention group if you've already learned and mastered that skill. We're going to look at the next batch of skills to see, okay, where are students that really need to be working on this? Like, I might be really good at my multiplication and horrible at my division skills. Well, I won't get picked up for multiplication, but I might get picked up for division. So in looking at that globally as a whole, we look at all the skills, and then we look at the ones that a lot of students are struggling with, and specifically plan for that group. So our plan is within the 6 to 8 weeks in between benchmarking, we'll see what support you actually need. So it changes. So it's funny, when we had purchased some books that would help students in small groups, I said, don't put their names on it with a magic marker, because they might not be the same group that we pull every 8 weeks, because you might move on from it. So, yes, did you want to?
No, there was a little fly, I was just,
All right, if you need any help with that, let me know. I've got some big hands, I'm happy to help.
believe it or not, I'm being quiet here.
Okay.
Larry?
I just, again, it's kind of scary to read those numbers, especially when you see a 0 in exceeding. I'm excited that you're doing this. So I don't want to be a Debbie Downer here, or whatever that expression is. I'm happy for you that you're working on these things. And what my real hope and prayer is that with the kind of work that you're doing, and with the dedication and commitment of the staff, and hopefully the parents and the students with you, that you're going to have the same kinds of results we saw in the presentation we got from Jess a couple of weeks ago. We need to see constant improvement. So these are just benchmarks, but the real test is to see the improvement, and it's got to be, and you got to, because even though I was a high school principal for most of my administrative career, I was a middle school principal for a while too, 9 years. The real foundation of learning is in Memorial School in Toy Town. That's where it all happens and comes together, because everything else is not going to have the kind of success that we're looking for if the kids can't read, and they can't write, and they can't compute, and they can't think critically, and those kinds of things. So I felt I'm feeling a little guilty for Shantae, because I kind of pushed it a little bit, but I know that we've been talking about this for a long time, and we haven't seen progress that we need to see. And I know when we interviewed Mr. King for superintendency, this was the conversation that we had with the superintendent, that this is what we really need to see. We really need to see improvement from the bottom up. And hopefully when the kids, as you said, have the skills as they continue to grow and have the skills, then we'll see more success in the middle school, and then we'll see more success at the high school. So it's, you guys are the foundation. You got a tough job. But
We have a lot of really amazing people that are doing this work, and I feel like we have a lot of pieces together, and staff has been absolutely so receptive in looking at what students did, like just to look at the MCAS and to see where students might have given up, and to kind of speculate, like, what can we do differently, and how do we teach in a different way that we're not gonna get this result? One of the examples that we did last year is when we used our WIN group, which is what I need now. So all the students were practicing math. We saw that a lot of students had a hard time responding to math problems. So the entire school worked on one strategic way to figure out how to do it. It's a mess problem. It's you just basically look at the problem, you think about it, you write down what you think the equation should be, you solve it, and you work backwards to make sure that you have the right answer. So in past, kids would see writing with the numbers and would just give up. Some kids wouldn't even try it. But because everybody did this little grid mark, and they went through and they were strategic about it, when I was destroying all the scrap papers, I saw kids trying that. And I thought to myself, I don't even care if they have the right answer. They are not giving up. They're trying. They have a strategy that's in their pocket that they know that they can use. So when we start to do and think about it that way, we want to prepare the kids to not panic and to not give up. We want to look at their writing this next round and see attempts being made. We want to see kids, getting those pieces. But I think everybody having a common language, looking at the data, talking about how we can do it in an interesting and fun way, You know, I feel really hopeful. It can be scary to look at the beginning, but I think hang on to your seat. That's what
All right, we will, hang on to our seats.
So I heard your gasp, Mr. Murphy, and you're going to have it again, because here's what we're looking at, and I'll just say it how it is. We're looking at our teachers right now who I would say are working triple time, because not only are you going to see for the next few years students coming in that have not received the schooling that we've been able to, prepare them with for the last few years. You're coming in with students that are half a year or full year behind, and we are still using the same benchmarks as we were before COVID. So until they have new norming and benchmark studies with how kids are currently performing, we are using those past benchmark standards. So when we're looking at students right now, we have to understand that they miss school. We had that in our last presentation about attendance. So our teachers are literally working triple time, filling in those gaps while also teaching grade level standards, because that's the expectation. So if you're in 7th grade, but you're reading at a 4th grade level, we're not only trying to teach you 7th grade standards, but help you fill in those gaps to read at a 7th grade level. So when you look at it that way, we are looking at each student's individual growth, and really focusing on how they're making progress compared with themselves. So when we're looking at students coming in, in grade 6, I'm thinking back as to a lot of these students still have 4th grade skills. But we're still looking at accelerating their learning to get them where they need to be by the end of 6th grade. So those are still our goals to get there. So again, our reading, we're at the same point right now as Memorial and Toy Town, and that's our goal. Same with math. It's very similar across the board for us at the middle school. So as our goal has always been, we want to move the kids to the left. We want to get them out of the not meeting expectations and move them up. And as we go from 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we want to decrease those numbers also. So what are we doing with our data? So we continue, we have an additional block of time during our school day for intervention, but also for enrichment. So for students who are performing in the exceeding expectations category, meeting expectations, we're actually pushing them forward with challenge projects, things like that. All of our intervention enrichment groups are based on their skills. This first cycle of intervention, we are focusing on our math skills and also vocabulary with targeted instruction and practice. Just to go a little bit further with MCAS, on October 7th, our full day PD, we really broke down each standard. We went item by item. We looked at which items students had difficulty with, really went through with a fine-tooth comb. And as we had discussed during our MCAS presentation, a big one is really where students have to write. So where they have to have enough stamina to write. Their idea development and conventions, so adding periods and commas and capitalization where things need to be, but also being exposed to a prompt, but having to answer it within a short amount of time. Because really, ideally, when we're working on writing within a school day, we chunk it into smaller pieces so they have several days to finish that piece of writing. So we need to build the kids' stamina in how long and how well they can respond to writing within a class period. In science, technology, and engineering, we found that we hit a lot of our earth science standards within 6th grade. We also hit them in 7th and 8th grade, but we need to spiral it more. There was a lot of questions on the 8th grade science that that really discussed earth science, so we need to make sure that we're spiraling it in a little bit more. So some acronyms for you. I got you, Mr. Vine. So STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. We actually have a course that runs throughout the year. And then Project Lead the Way. So we are using those two aspects, those two classes, to prioritize the technology and engineering standards. I'm not sure people understand how many standards there are for science, technology, and engineering. So the science teachers, we're really making sure that they can focus specifically on the science standards. And math, the big one was, wow, that is a really long problem where I have to read a lot. So again, it's the lengthy word problems where, you know, a student may see a full page of words and they're like, this is math, I don't want to read all of this. So that's a big thing that we found, that we need to make sure students stick with reading lengthy multi-step problems through. And that's where we are at the middle school.
Just so there's a good amount of data that's not COVID related, you know, it's multiple years saying that young people, I'm thinking more high school, but maybe middle school as well, having trouble with sentence construction and all kinds of things mostly because of this, right? But I've never heard the stamina thing before. Is that a COVID thing? Is that an attention deficit?
No, I think something that, it's the ability to sit and to write and be able, because when you think about writing and how many, you know, things that you have to be able to do at one time to be able to write, that's always been something, but I don't think that it's really been brought up a lot. But now we're seeing it much more where students just don't have the energy or haven't been built up enough to write for a significant amount of time. So when you're thinking about taking the ELA assessment in 7th grade, you have several questions where, some of them are multiple choice, or you have to select the correct answer and move it around. But most of it is you have to sit and respond to a prompt, to a question. You have to compare and contrast. So to be able to do that for a long period of time, and it's only one day that you get to finish this, we have to build it up throughout the school day and build it through all content areas.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
I don't have a question. I want to thank Jess for answering the question that I had from the very start of this presentation in terms of how much of this can be blamed on, for lack of a better term, the COVID pandemic and the kids having to learn at home. And, you know, it was a couple of years that they had to do that, and I think it's important that parents in the community understand that 2 years, may not sound like much to a lot of people, but it's not something that can be made up in a term or a half of a year necessarily. It's going to be a long process to get the kids caught up. So if they see scores like this, although it is scary, I think it's good that you're here to explain that steps are being taken to make sure that there is a progression for the students to get back to where they need to be. So thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes?
So how are you working with the lower grades to work on building up the stamina? Because I think that is a good point, especially since I think we are seeing, you know, we have concerns, but just knowing that, you know, when we think about the pandemic and we think about the students that were at home, and some of them, you know, I mean, talk about distraction magnets. And a classroom can be distracting, but not as distracting as, hey, the dog's here, I can play with the dog, or hey, my sister's over there and she isn't in class right now. But I mean, when you take all of that and then you add in that we live in a digital world and they have everything at their fingertips, and now we're in school, and so, I mean, are we thinking about a way to bridge that back to the lower levels so that when you're teaching them how to write, we're thinking about that stamina level too. So I don't know if you've addressed
We're
that.
just laughing because we talk about this all the time.
Okay.
So like Shantae and I, like I'm kind of like the monkey in the middle. So Shantae and I talk about how can we engage our youngest children to speak longer, to give us those sentences, because if you can speak it, eventually you can write it. And then Jess and I talk about it when I'm like, okay, strategically, what are the things that are going to make a difference? And we know it's just write. We have to redevelop. We need kids to feel important. We need kids to know that we're listening to what they're saying, what their feedback is, and what they're giving us, and that, again, building up their tolerance to be able to sit and attend and really answer deeply the questions that we're asking them.
And I didn't think you were giggling about that. I mean, I totally,
Literally, that's like our scripts, like, okay, how do we
right.
target this?
And the word stamina comes up in school all the time, and we build stamina for everything. We build stamina for, reading. We build stamina for gym class. The other day, a gym class was coming up, and the comment was, they can't sustain a gym class for 40 minutes. They're exhausted. The kids just are out of shape. Like so it's really. And these are little kids. We're talking first graders. You wouldn't expect first graders to be tired after a 40-minute gym class, but they are. They're exhausted. So we're constantly talking about building them up, and so everything involves building them up and building their attention, and constantly having to have movement breaks because something that should take you 10 minutes really is taking you 30 because you have to build in 3 movement breaks because they can't sustain their attention, right? Because we do live in a very distracting world, and oftentimes they don't even know how to be not distracted. So we're really even teaching how to be peaceful and how to be calm and how to be quiet. So even that, it's like, I had told the teachers to take some quiet time, and they're working on just having quiet time where the kids are just quiet for 3 minutes, and that's hard for them. So it's building that stamina because everything's just so chaotic. So everything is about building stamina, including writing. But they don't have the pencil skills on top of it. Like, I'm getting kids to hold crayons and be able to color so that they can have the ability to write. So it's a process all the way across.
And that's what, and that's why I was asking going back, because I know that, I see, and I can't imagine, because I'm glad that my children weren't able to have this in their hands, because I see people handing their babies phones. So you're getting kids coming into you that know how to do this, but don't know how to do this. And that's concerning because that means you're having a harder time going up
For
each
example, our
level.
OT referrals and our OT screens and
Right.
our OT watches. So that's that fine motor, our ability for kids to hold pencils and, fine motor skills is a concern. Our speech referrals and our speech watches are huge because they're not speaking to each other or speaking so that's again
this.
what we're talking about.
Mr. Chair,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Angelina?
I would just like to speak on the, as someone who went through online learning in, I think it was sophomore and junior, and I would consider myself a pretty high-level student, my attention span has been completely wrecked. And it's because I hate when people are like, it's social media, but it's social media. It's because I was distracted. Like, I had no reason, I had no discipline to not look at my phone while I was learning Algebra 2, and now I'm facing the repercussions. But I just find it... No, I just find it interesting how, the younger kids are also being affected by it, and I feel like, yes, the stamina, I would consider myself higher up, but, if I see a long word problem in Miss Ricard's class, I go,
We can help you at Toy Town with that.
Yeah, but, it's really, like, I'm happy I'm here. I'm like happy that you're like actively tackling that now, and like, I'm really excited to see what the stamina and like what the results will be when we go down the line, because I feel like a lot of the stuff that you're talking about seems like really exciting and like innovative, and I feel like it's different from when I was in Toy Town. So, yeah, that's all I have to say.
I think we have, I know your dad can speak to this. It's all hands on deck. Like every single person, every tall person in that building is really engaged and understanding where students are and really promoting that. We're discussing possibly doing a talent show, and the another unified art teacher said they're going to have to write a proposal. We need to get them writing. They're going to have to type up a proposal to talk about what their act is, and it's exactly where we're hoping to be. Like print-rich environment where kids really understand the importance and the power of writing. So,
I love
come on down anytime.
the tall person. I love now I have a visual of who you're talking about, and thank you for the what's the competition you're going to have soon?
Oh, it'll be the talent show.
Talent show. All right, next person to ask a question is going to compete in your talent show. Larry, did you have something to say?
I just want to warn you that the judges are going to be particularly harsh, and if you don't practice your act, don't bother. And it's a 2-minute act, so.
Can I go now, please?
Well, I just wanted to say that this is not, the writing aspect of any of the assessments and the students not doing as well on that is not new. For the last, when I retired in 2015, but for the 10 years before that, that was always the weakness of every school I was in. Students, even some of our best students, they would leave the prompt blank because they had had enough of the test and they just were tired. I would like look at, I would say, what? We had 5 kids left it blank? What's going on? And they would just tell me that, hey, I had enough. I had enough. We went through the whole thing and 3 days of testing and we just had enough. And then other kids would just write 1 sentence for the prompt. And so, their scores weren't as good as they could be. So we focused really hard, similar to what you're saying, is getting to kids to write a lot more in every class across the curriculum. So even, and I noticed my grandson's doing it now, he's in 7th grade. He had math homework the other night, he was at my house, and he had to explain why, in writing, why he got the steps he took and why the logic he used to get the answer. So, they're doing it in his school. So I think it's a great thing. I'm glad that you're focusing on it, because writing is such an important skill. And I think once the kids see that it's not as scary as they may think it is, and they'll build up the stamina the more writing that they do. I love it.
MJ?
All I can say is thank God they didn't have it in 1970. No, that's fine.
I'm glad you talked about stamina, because I do truly believe that those are some of the issues we had at the high school. Because if you take a look at our scores, it looks like over 70 to 80% of our students are not meeting or partially meeting expectations. And we've had some conversations with the students, assistant principal, and the teachers, and we know that the students are more successful just based on their skills. So I think really as Angelina had said, we think that, it is because when they sat down. Now, that being said, teachers are now sharing this information with the students. So when the students are seeing when they get their grades back, because we're now doing standards-based grading, especially in the math department, they do see these colors, the red, the yellow, the green, and the blue. And when they see that, the teacher says, or an instructor will say, hey, looks like you almost got there, why don't you take this back and work on it again. So really, they're doing more of that in the classroom so that the students, if you're not quite there yet, let's work together to get it done. So I expect significant differences when I see the next benchmark testing, which we'll be doing right around Thanksgiving. So ours is going to be a bit longer. But, you will be pleased, Larry, that we do have some kids exceeding expectations in our area. But I think we have far more not meeting impartially than everybody else. But truly, I think the kids thought this was going to be more MCAS-based, and when they realized, when they started going through the test, it was a little bit, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, I think they took a little more thought and effort into doing it. So I think they're starting to do a little bit more work for that. So, Doug, our assistant principal, has really worked with a lot of the teachers. We're sitting down looking at the data and moving forward that way. We do it a couple of different ways. We do it by class, and then we're doing some school-wide initiatives as well. So this week I gave a presentation to the staff looking at the MCAS and the STAR data. I gave them the same presentation that I gave you on the MCAS. So really, some of the school-based initiatives, as you had said, is, we're looking at writing across the curriculum. In all of looking at the STAR data and the MCAS data, writing seems to be different, but again, I think that has to do with stamina. It has to do with, historical evidence. So, one of the things I did do at the faculty meeting is, let's see if we can have writing everywhere. And I know that, we're going to be doing some PD and literacy in the next couple of months, so that's what we're looking at to do that. IM Math, the new curriculum we have, really has some time built in it into the day for intervention. So they're doing some of the interventions actually in the class. We have students working in academic support. There is some pre-teaching going on for some of our students who have some significant needs. So they get the material ahead of time, and then they go to a math class to get the reinforcement. So we're working on that as well. And then we also have some of our staff members working with a consultant from Looney Math, looking at, instructional practices and really making sure that we're using this IM with fidelity. So we're really hopeful for that. So again, in ELA, we're looking at a new writing program, and we're trying to identify the at-risk student by offering some academic support classes to them. In other classes, we've asked them to increase writing across curriculum. For example, one of the things I talked about at the faculty meeting was, everybody can write, even in art class, a gym class. You can compare two pieces of art, Picasso and Monet, whatever it may be, and put some arguments in there. So really, I'm trying to get more of that done. We will be meeting next week in half day, and I will be working with the ELA department in some of those strategies, and the assistant principal is going to be working with math to take a look at that. And during the class-based initiatives, we really try to look at the data cycle, which is right now, we've collected the data, we've analyzed the data, and right now we're in the third stage of, making instructional decisions. What can we do to shore up the instruction for our students? And then they're going to plan for it, and then, do the interventions, reflect on it, and the cycle continues. So as I said, these are some of the things we're doing. We're also starting to do some learning walks. And what's really exciting is, a lot of these initiatives have already been put into the district plan, the literacy and the math. And to be honest with you, the social emotional learning, which really supports some of the, the stamina issues and some of the other issues that we need to support the students, holistically, so that we can get them to be where they need to be. So, this is good data that we're using a lot, and it really aligns with the district plan, which again aligns with the school improvement plans, and it aligns with the teachers' classroom lessons. So, we are working hard. A lot more one-on-one teaching is happening for the students, especially with the IM Math. That's what we have.
Just a quick question. If I missed it at the beginning, I apologize. When will we see another, I guess, a repeat of this assessment to compare? Is it once a year? Is it twice a year? When are we going to have some comparison?
So we can do 3 times a year, so that's the benchmarking. And what we're talking about, what's happening coming up the first week of November, is kind of a screening window where we can also progress monitor and see how students are doing. We also have the opportunity to create custom assessments that we can do in the interim. So for example, we have 17 intervention groups. Well, one intervention group is working on something different than the other intervention group. So we can actually create custom, 10-question assessments to look at just those specific skills that they're working on during that intervention time. So we have a couple of different opportunities, but what we're going to be doing in the next few weeks is opening another screening window, having the students test again And we are able to do this progress monitoring because there's such a huge bank of questions that we're able to do it that way.
How old is this data? How long ago was this put together?
The first testing happened within the first few weeks of September.
On the 10th and 11th.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's why you would expect some growth, because you're going to.
Correct. That's why we've had several weeks in between, where now we're at that end of that first cycle of intervention.
Yep.
It's the end of October now.
It's okay. We did it the second week of September on our end, yeah, and I think we all did it on the same.
Around the same time, yep.
Other questions?
Steve did.
I just wanted to take a couple of things that came to mind during the presentations. Thank you all for putting all that together. You did a great job. Mr. Vine mentioned something about COVID and what the impact is, and you know, I don't think there's a lot of literature or research on that yet. It's a little bit early. However, there's older literature, and there's a lot of it that speaks to the effect of 1 year of bad teaching on a student's outcomes and how long it takes to make that up. And the literature then, you know, kind of pre-COVID around this, would say that one bad year of sort of teaching, if you will, took multiple years to recover from, up to 3. So we're talking about multiple years of COVID. Let's just equate that to really bad teaching, and that they're home, they're distracted, they're Zoom, it's part-time, it's full-time, it's, you know, what is it, right? I mean, we all know that it was negative. So if we kind of use that as sort of a baseline in our thought process, it's going to take time to recover from this for all of our students, not just, you know, 1 or 2. So, but with that, I think what you saw tonight and what you're hearing a little bit tonight, and I think that Mr. Murphy mentioned when, you know, I was interviewing for this position, one of my real concerns was we often in this district have in the past just presented data. This is where students are. Okay, great, and move on. And there wasn't a lot of talk about the intervention. You know, I think that the middle school was different in that Jess had started this work, you know, a number of years ago, and that was reflected in some of the MCAS data now. But, you know, this is a different approach that we're taking and than what we've done in the past. I think, you know, they've used the words progress monitoring. And so if you think about the way probably most of us went to school, it was you were taught something, you took a test, great, here's your grade, and we just keep trucking through, right? Doesn't really make a lot of sense, but that's how a lot of us went to school. And so what we're trying to do, and it's, you know, it's not groundbreaking, it's not, you know, cutting edge, but it's, hey, we just taught you something. Let's see if you learned it. And if you didn't, we need to do something about it. And that's what this is really about. And it's not something that we've done very well, I think, historically in this district. And so when you hear that progress monitoring and the new windows and so on, it's to say every student is receiving their grade level instruction all along throughout the year. But then at interims, we say, let's see how you're doing. Let's progress monitor. And even though we found out that student X didn't pick up a particular skill, a particular standard, they're going to continue learning what they're supposed to learn while they also get sort of a parallel track to get them caught up. And so these groups that we hear about, these intervention groups, they're not static. And I think that Ms. Diaz mentioned that. They're going to change. Just because you didn't know, you know, your multiplication skills in September doesn't mean you need to be in the multiplication intervention group for the rest of the year, right? But, you know, I mean, I think we kind of have a history here of doing some of those types of things. I don't think Johnny does a great job at this. We'll just keep hammering away at it for a long time. We're much, you know, that was kind of a static approach to the way we did things. We're going to be much more active in our use of data and making sure that students are getting what they need, and as they learn it, we can continue moving. But we're going to keep an eye on those skills. So I think that's a really important piece. And really, I think what you saw here as well, and I think it came up with Karen mentioning, you know, are we doing that at all the schools? I think you can see by the interactions up here tonight, like we've talked in here a lot about removing silos and not working in silos, and we don't do that. We're working across the district to do all of these things and doing them in concert and doing them vertically. But the last piece I want to make really clear, especially for folks at home, because people get really anxious when we start talking about assessing kids, and we've mentioned the word MCAS repeatedly in here tonight. I want to be clear that this is not about, these tests are not about MCAS. These tests are about ensuring that students learn the standards they're supposed to learn when they learn them. And if the students learn the standards they're supposed to when they're at the right times, MCAS takes care of itself. We're not teaching to a test. We are teaching the standards that are appropriate at a grade level and making sure they learn them. If they do, MCAS resolves itself. So I just want to be really clear that this isn't about teaching to a test. It's about teaching to the standards for the state of Massachusetts.
Yeah.
I'm finished.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Superintendent, any other questions for the principals before we let them off the hook? Thank you very much. Great information. Looking forward to seeing the updates. Mr. Superintendent, did you have anything else for us tonight?
No.
All right. All right, folks, that puts us in new business. Our next agenda item is an update and, if warranted, a discussion on the master plan. This is the Winchendon Master Plan, which has been completed for a good while, and the Master Plan Implementation Committee is now doing its work, and that is exactly what it sounds like, working to take the various items, the various action items within the master plan and putting them into action. The Master Plan Implementation Committee has invited us as the school committee, as they have done with other boards in town, to be a part of that work. And so I was lucky enough on Monday, this past Monday, to participate in their meeting via Zoom, where they took on one of the 9 action areas within the master plan, and this action item is their open space action item. This is one of 9. There are a number of other portions of the master plan, including land use, historical resources, and transportation, and a number of other things. But when it comes to open space, the Master Plan Implementation Committee has identified at least one of the strategies within the master plan that would certainly have the potential to involve the schools. And that is strategy 3.1, which is specifically developing a network of neighborhood and school playgrounds and walking routes. So to that end, the Master Plan Implementation Committee has identified our board and our district as partners in that work, and therefore we have agreed to explore, with the administration's help, anything that the school system can do to contribute to exactly that strategy, and that is developing a network of playgrounds and walking routes. That investigation will take place between now and the month of December, when in the month of December we will participate in another meeting of the Implementation Committee, where we will share what options we might have found, and other parts of the town may share the same, all leading towards the goal of Strategy 3.1. And that's the update of what's happened recently. Happy to take any questions or discussion. No. Oh, Larry?
So, walking routes and playgrounds for neighborhoods, is that what we're looking at? Because we have a brand new one at Toy Town. We have, I don't know what the status of the Memorial School playground is. Is that functional? I know it wasn't for a while.
Oh, yeah, it's absolutely
Yeah,
functional.
so we got one there. The Clark has one, so there's 3. And we have the walking trail at the Clark, we have the walking trail. So I'm just curious as to,
Mr. Chair? I don't know.
Hang on one second. You curious
yeah,
about what?
I was just curious as to why playgrounds and walking routes were identified as areas of need.
I don't think anyone at this table can answer that, because the master plan was a cumulative effort that didn't necessarily include elected officials entirely.
Greg's chomping at the bit.
Greg's trying to answer.
Well, I just wanted to say, because I was on the master plan committee
Yeah, I thought so.
for a few years when it first got started. And I know at that time, I mean, I haven't been privy to conversations probably for 3 or 4 years at least, but I know that they were looking at a need for playground activities, either facilities, not necessarily along the scale of what we have at the schools, but in other neighborhoods other than downtown, like for instance in Waterville, or over in Spring Village. You know, the feasibility of establishing playgrounds in those areas and where they might go and.
Right. See, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
I thought it might be neighborhood
Right.
referenced rather than numbers.
Right, so those were the sorts of things, again, at that time anyway, that's what we were looking
Well,
at.
that's,
Mr. Chair,
Karen?
so could we invite somebody that might know the answer to that from the master planning committee to
That-
maybe
I think that'd be a
come?
good idea.
We could.
Or can you get those answers and bring them back to us? Because I think for me, you know, it's nice that we have playgrounds at the schools, but not everybody in Winchendon has cars or the ability to get to the schools other than sending their children on school buses. And as Greg pointed out, not all of us live downtown. And if we're looking at establishing playgrounds in other areas, I think that's something that I'd like to know. And if we're talking about walking routes, are we talking about walking routes to the playgrounds, or are we talking just walking routes in general? Because as I pointed out during our transportation discussion, for safety reasons, like in my neighborhood, we don't have sidewalks. So a walking route might be difficult to establish, and Greg may know the answer to that too.
No, I don't know the answer. I mean, all I can say is when I hear the word walking group, all I can think of is the Silver Sneakers groups walking around the mall, so I don't know what, you know,
See,
specifically they
I
have in
think of the
mind.
walking school buses, like the little kids walking in a group.
So let's be clear for a moment. These are strategies that come out of a master plan. And the Master Plan Implementation Committee has been clear thus far in its work that the committee is not intending to define the strategies. So we have a strategy that is exactly 10 words. Within those 10 words, we may find the opportunity to contribute to it in a way that it would be creative, in a way that may benefit the schools as well as the town. But aside from an individual's recollections or an opinion of the implementation committee, it's really wide open. So it could be neighborhood playgrounds. It could be walking routes outside of downtown. And it could be probably 20 other things if we sat here long enough and thought about it. This is really our opportunity to provide a sliver of contribution to what is a broader effort on this strategy. And so, in addition to what the administration may, be able to dream up, I think we have the opportunity to do the same. So, all these ideas, neighborhood playgrounds in Waterville, walkways outside of downtown, those are all great ideas. Sidewalks in general.
Well, I'd like to see playgrounds outside of the schools, no offense, but I
I'm not
mean,
offended.
And
You can wish for playgrounds wherever you'd like, Karen.
I'm just saying, I mean, it'd be nice for
you
the,
offended?
for the families outside of, but I'd also like to hear from the students what they'd like to see. So maybe you can take that back to the student council and have a discussion at your student council meeting.
If I may. So I don't know if playgrounds would be the most necessary for high schoolers, but I can, I can ask and I can look into, I don't know. Do you have any ideas on how I could engage that? From my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but are we this is the master plan committee is proposing that this should be a thing and we're saying oh yes, we can totally look into doing playgrounds, or are we what is the purpose of this is my question.
Yeah, so the town has a master plan that was developed over the course of multiple years that includes, of course, I've closed it now. There we go. Includes a number of different action areas for the town. So one area, for instance, is housing. So the master plan says that we need more affordable and middle-income housing, if I remember correctly. In addition to that, there's transportation, making transportation safer in town. So there's a broad effort to make change in town that would improve transportation. This one area that was called to the attention of the school committee is the area regarding open space And the reason we were called to it is because specifically in the master plan that exists is that phrase that I shared with you a moment ago about the walkways and sidewalks. So that's it. That, the plan just calls for us to consider what opportunities we can improve our town, and this is our opportunity to consider and possibly make implementation soon.
Okay. Yeah, I think, like Karen said, it's an enrichment opportunity. So again, yeah, kids don't, like, not all families have transportation to be able to go to the more centralized playgrounds, and like having more, like community-based, like maybe in the lower income areas, or like I live up near Old Center, like that's a good 7-minute drive to Murdoch. Kids are less apt to leave their houses if they don't have those methods of transportation. So I think that like having more playgrounds and walkways would be great to look into. But I'm also wondering, like, would funding from that come from the schools, or?
No.
No, it would be like school. Sorry, I'm also not clear on like how funding works. I'm like brand new.
Yeah, so any funding that would come from the schools would benefit the schools. You know, we would look to, if perhaps, you know, add a extension to the playground at one of our schools. That would be something that a school system would do and could feed into the broader town's master plan for improving playgrounds or walkways. But we wouldn't, for instance, build a playground, you know, off of a school property. That would be unlikely.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may. So, Angelina, it might be something as solid as building a new basketball court in an area where kids can have access, a neighborhood, putting lights up so that you can have nighttime activities. I don't know, lights for the baseball field or something, so that events could be held, not just athletic events, but maybe other kinds of events could be held. It could be things like that. That's what you know, my brain is starting to come up. So, I mean, it's great. How can we improve the town? And it's not just this one thing. It's a whole bunch of things.
Right.
And so, I think students' perspective. So I know when you say playgrounds, you're like rolling your eyes a little bit, saying, I don't know if I'm gonna buy in, 12th graders are gonna buy in for a playground. Maybe they would, I don't know. But I know that some schools have done big projects through the town, such as they built dugouts for the baseball field. It was the town field, so everybody benefited. Because not just the high school team used the field, but there were leagues and things like that. So they built dugouts, they put lights in, they built a basketball court at one town that I'm aware of in New Hampshire when I was up there. They built it wasn't involved with the school, it was for the town. They built a basketball court with lights, and the lights stayed on till 10 o'clock, and they automatically shut off at 10 o'clock. So there's stuff like that can be done.
Or you could do an amphitheater.
Yes, and I was gonna say because that's what I thought with the walking
Right.
thing.
That's-
Because up at Ingleside, there's gonna be a walking trail. They're building a walking trail, and they got an amphitheater for those thespians in the town. I might come out of retirement and get into
But
a couple plays.
Angelina mentioned something too important, sorry, Larry. You said like the transportation, and I think that's another issue that,
Yeah,
that I think the students should weigh in on, because I think that students are limited by what they can do after school, because they either need to get on the school bus or catch, you know, if they're going on team sports or whatever, you know, they're kind of, if they don't have a ride or they don't have some kind of transportation. I know a couple kids out my way that either walk or ride their bikes, and Ronan has fun getting, you know, yelled at or whatever. But It's something that I think that the students should weigh in on that piece too, and Ryan can probably take that back. But I think it should be important to note that just because that was brought to us as the school piece, because they thought, oh, yeah, schools, it should be noted that you and the students and anybody that's paying attention to this long meeting can weigh in on the master plan, on any piece of it at any time. I don't know how they're supposed to do that. I'm sure Ryan can give a little more information, but I'm sure there's a way. I know there is, but that's not my area right now.
Right.
We could sit here and bounce ideas off of each other for the rest of the night, but we have more agenda items. I guess I'm wondering if it might be, at this point, advisable, I guess, for each committee member, to do their own thinking about this and maybe present you with the ideas that happen to come up. And when the master plan committee meets again, either you can, present them as the representative of the school committee, and we, if we're available, be there to back you up. But I just think that we should probably move on and get to the rest of the agenda and come up with a way to deal with this.
Indeed, I think that's a great idea. Certainly happy to take any suggestions, ideas, what have you, back to the group. I think I'm invested now, so I think I'm going back. And I want to echo exactly what Karen just said. This is for every townsperson, student in the district, and not just focused on this one item that our school committee happens to be interested in,
Right.
but any of those other areas. The whole town is encouraged to get engaged with the master plan implementation committee. Good deal of information on the town website on that. And thank you, Greg, for the suggestion. We'll move it along to the MASC conference discussion, and perhaps Karen can lead us in this one.
So we have the very exciting MASC conference coming up the beginning of next month. So I will not be at our next meeting. I know you'll all miss me terribly. But I did send everybody here the resolutions that will be voted on at the annual meeting portion of the conference. And I did want everybody to have a chance, and you don't have to necessarily do it here. I don't see any need to discuss it unless you all want to. But if you have any questions or concerns and want to bring them up now, did you want me to go through the resolutions? I don't think we need to elongate the meeting by doing that.
Mr. Chair, I didn't get an email,
I
and
know, I'm
I
sorry.
would love to give you my information. I would love to be included on all this stuff, but I can give that to you.
And I will
afterwards.
give you a copy, because I have an extra copy.
Okay,
So-
thank you. That's all.
Mr. Superintendent, do we happen to have the extra packet that would have,
Do I have it?
so
It's in here.
in your packet, there's a, at the top of the page, it's blue lettering, it says Report of the Resolutions Committee. Larry?
I was just gonna say, I think Karen's idea is a solid one as far as, we need to take a look at those resolutions and send her questions or concerns, or, so that she can take them with her. I'm not sure we need to go through all of them tonight, but I think that would be something that would be helpful, I think.
So the resolutions that were shared, frankly, I think I'm supportive of all of them. But there is one that I would have a question about, and either Karen or the superintendent may have better information on this one, but this is resolution number 2. This is the one to increase the maximum balance allowed in the special education reserve funds, which would bring the percentage from 2% to 5%, potentially increasing by tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars that would be in the sped reserve accounts. And I think the question is that then a minimum percentage, in which case a school district would have to budget for that in a way that could drastically affect budgets if that were to be supported by the legislature in the future?
Did you want to answer that, Mr. King?
I'll be honest, I don't have any insight on that right this second.
Okay,
Obviously, this is a mask resolution, right? This is not a piece of legislation at all.
Right. Well, I mean, the suggestion is that this be taken to the so all these resolutions at some point are, the reason that we move them forward is to try to get them passed into mass law. So right now, under mass law, I believe the cap is 2%.
It is.
Yes, so the cap would then be 5%, so it wouldn't be the minimum, so our cap would be 5%.
But 5% of a $15 million budget,
Chunk of change.
3% increase on a $15 million budget could be significant. I think that's what I'm hearing the chair say, and yeah, I totally missed that one. I whiffed on that one. I'm glad you picked it up.
Right, but
Okay.
what is our special ed budget already for out-of-district placements? So this is allowing us, so this basically is saying that during the school year, so so right now, if we're capped at 2% during the school year, if we were to go over that, how do we pay for that, Mr. King?
Currently, you would use circuit breaker.
Say one more time?
Circuit breaker.
Circuit breaker funds,
I mean,
yeah.
We're in a current situation, at least for us, where we hold back, as an example, the receipts that we receive this year in FY '22 will not be spent in FY '22. We're spending currently FY '21's, do I have the years right? I'm sorry. I'm behind a year. We're in FY '23. So we're currently receiving receipts for FY '23.
I was like, wait a minute.
We're receiving FY '23 receipts. We will not be spending those this year. We are required to spend last year's receipts, FY '22. So we can hold those for 1 year, but then we're required to spend them the following year. So right now, we're in a really good spot where we have been able to continue to carry that, 1 year to the next. We budget for that. We actually put, if you'll recall in the budget for this year, we actually account for last year's receipts as a part of paying for out-of-district expenses. If we were get caught in some situation where a family moves in or whatever, we would go ahead and spend the funds we're receiving this year and wouldn't have as much to carry forward. So that's how we currently would handle that.
Do we have
I guess my question, again, because I'm not the budget genius in this group, is if we went along with increasing those numbers, does that mean that the district,
so
we
don't,
have to spend more as a district before we could actually access the circuit breaker monies given to us by the state?
so this allows for municipalities in conjunction with their school district to create a special education reserve fund. It doesn't say we have to. So basically, we can use the circuit breaker fund, right, which I believe most do. And I wasn't part of this resolutions committee, so I can't answer why Plimpton, put this forward and why it was moved forward from there. But they must have a reason. Maybe their circuit breaker doesn't cover whatever they're dealing with, and they've had to do this. And I'm sure that for whatever reason, other districts have had to do this. But the way that I'm reading this, just as someone who has worked in law for a long time, this is not tying us into having to do this. This is saying that if we wanted to with our town, since we don't do that now, it's not something we'd have to do. I can clarify that with Tracy and get you an answer, even before the conference, I'm sure.
I guess having flexibility is okay, but I'm just wondering, again, if we create a reserve fund and you know, we got a big chunk of money in there, is the state gonna say, well, you don't need the circuit breaker money, you got plenty of cash in your own accounts?
It's a good, different question.
Right. So if you want, I will find that out. I will just ask Tracy, or I'll even ask Ellen.
Mr. Chair,
Angelina?
what are circuit breaker funds?
That is a Mr. King thing that I think he should
That's
have a
about an hour
conversation with you.
Of an explanation, but
Or I can have that conversation with you tomorrow
Okay,
via phone.
just trying to follow along.
It's a good question, we can talk about. I'm happy to have a conversation.
All right, so we've identified some questions
Yep.
that, depending on the answers, I suppose that would, encourage you to hear our concerns about that resolution and whether or not to vote yea on that one.
Yep.
Otherwise, I think the other 5 solutions are,
I think Greg had a
Fantastic.
question
Yeah,
on one, too.
I'll send her another question. I have concerns about resolution number 4, in terms of us getting involved in other school districts' business, as it were.
the receivership one?
Yeah.
And can I just speak to that very briefly? Just because I do have a unique perspective on that, just because I did work with those districts in particular when they were fighting receivership. And because I'm very familiar with the fight that Boston's had recently against this. The reason that I think it is important for us as a district is because God forbid it ever happened to us.
It came close.
Right, and that's what I'm thinking of, and then we would be no longer in charge. So our local government would have no say over what was happening to our schools.
Right.
And if it were to happen, the problem is that we have seen in Lawrence and Holyoke and all the other districts that they were taken over by DESE, who was supposed to make this great, wonderful change. And, Jeff Riley was the person in charge of Lawrence. I don't know if you're aware of that, but he was the person put in charge. And I worked with Denise Snyder, who was my co-chair at Boston Arts Academy when she was his second in command at Lawrence, when they were in charge there. And here we are, and their scores are no better. So, they've had receivership for how long, and DESE couldn't make it better. So, what this is saying is that they should be, if the state were to take receivership, they would have 3 years, just like most turnaround districts get 3 years initial funding, or however they do it. That doesn't mean this is gonna happen, this is just, so that's something to mull about. I will still take your concerns, but it's just something to think about, because I think it is something that I would hate to see Winchendon residents not have a say. I would hate any district to not have a say. I would hate to see any of you not have a say in your school district. I would hate our students to not have a say in their schools. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay.
Any other concerns or ones that we'd like to provide extra emphasis on before Karen represents us at the conference? Not hearing any. Let's move it along. Our next item is the substitute pay vote. Mr. Superintendent, would you like to speak on this one?
Sure. About a year ago, we talked about substitute pay in general. We made some changes just for the last school year, so I thought it would be important to just kind of bring it back up, compare ourselves to some other districts, just to see if we're comfortable with where we're at relative to substitutes in the current situations. If you recall last year, I think the primary change that we made was for long-term substitutes, where the historic model is, and it's not actually documented, you do have a small spreadsheet in your packets. Historically, you pay long-term substitutes for someone that might be out on a medical FMLA of some sort. The substitute has to work for approximately 30 days before they get a bump in pay from the typical day-to-day sub. So if you recall last year, what we did was we waived that and said, you get the long-term pay beginning day 1, and we actually voted in here to make that pay as a bachelor step 1 pay equivalent is how we address that. I believe we raised the pay a little bit last year as well to the rates that are reflected here. and that we did maintain, but that long-term pay was just ended last year. And so I think it was worthy, the sub pay comes up every year. Last year was the first time we had reviewed it in a very long time, and so I think it's something that's just worth kind of constantly reviewing to make sure that we're competitive with surrounding districts. What we have in front of you tonight is just the districts that responded to us. We send out through a listserv to receive folks and how they pay various different rates: teachers, paras, custodians, secretaries, and nurses. So.
Mr. Superintendent, I believe that these are the rates that have already been set. These wouldn't need to be voted on unless we attempted to change them.
Unless we attempt to change. There's not a vote necessary unless we want to change something. I know the one that has come up for us recently has just been the custodial substitute rate has been something that I know has been raised. Our current rate is $17 an hour, and that is paid hourly for substitutes. We have been using a lot of substitute custodians as of late. The good news is we've just hired a couple of custodians, so we're down 2 custodians in terms of some folks who have moved to other positions and so on. And then one person moved to another position, and then of course you'll recall in the budget last year we added a custodial position. So we are hiring both of those. Our current rate for subs is $17 an hour. You'll see that they kind of vary as you look up and down that particular column. The one that's interesting is the Greenfield one, where they just use step 1 of the contract, and so just a quick calculation for us. Step 1 of our current contract that we just voted on is approximately $17.25 an hour is a step 1, so we're relatively close to that. My recommendation would be that we are not paying our substitutes at a higher rate than we pay our actual custodians at a particular step. So it seems to me that we might be in line in that general area.
Mr. Chair?
Greg?
I'm not sure what the proper motion is. I was going to say I'd make a motion that we just table this.
What?
All right, we have a motion to table. Is there a second?
Do we need to table it?
No second?
Since we don't have to vote on it, do we need to table it? I'm sorry, I have a question.
I think the question is, do we need to vote on it? And I don't think we do.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to, all right.
If there are questions that you want me to look into, I can certainly look into those and bring back at another time. If not, if we're happy, we don't have to vote. We can say we're happy, and this is what is currently, those are the pay rates we pass out to anybody coming in and interested in substituting.
Yeah, just pass over it.
What? Yeah. So this is what it is now.
Those are our current rates. If someone comes in and is interested in substituting, or there's any questions, we have a
And so-
one-pager that we pass out, and it has all these rates
So
on it.
the only thing that we would do is either lower it or raise it in a motion,
Yes.
right?
Yep. Agreed, yes.
So my motion is that we pass over it.
All right, I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second to pass over item 8C. Any discussion? My only discussion is I don't think we need this motion. I think we can
That's
just...
what I was saying.
Oh, well.
But we can vote on it. There's nothing wrong
Well,
with
it's on
passing
the
it.
agenda, so we don't need to deal with it. That's what the Passover is.
All right. So we want to withdraw that motion?
Now we'll try it.
All right, motion withdrawn. All right, we're moving on. Number 9, subcommittee definitions and charges. In your packet, you have a number of definitions for some of the subcommittees that we were not able to get to at our last meeting. And I'm going to ask that we consider 1, 2, 3 of them. If you want to jot this down, the 3 that we're going to consider are the Wellness Subcommittee. Wellness Subcommittee. The second one is the Sick Bank Subcommittee. And the third is the Collaborative Representative. For tonight's purposes, we're going to skip over the Town-wide Audit and the Capital Planning Subcommittee. And the reason for skipping those 2 over is because the membership on your handout is not fully fleshed out. So what's in front of you for the Wellness Subcommittee? sick bank, and collaborative representatives are purposes, responsibilities, requirements, and membership outlines for those three, similar to the ones that we voted in a couple of weeks ago. If voted through tonight, these would become the definitions or charters for those three subcommittees. Thoughts on the wellness, sick bank, or collaborative representative? And/or certainly entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Angelina?
for the wellness subcommittee, I was just looking at the membership, and I was wondering if there was a possibility we could have a student representative position on this committee. I noticed that there was included a member of the Winchendon community and a Winchendon parent, but I feel like a student representative position would be beneficial here. Who would propose that? How would that work?
You could.
Oh, okay. How do I do that? Do I just say I propose? Oh, I did?
You just did.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm new. Okay.
Mr. Superintendent, maybe you could talk a little bit about how this subcommittee has operated. I know it hasn't been very active in the last year, but prior to that, I think it had some activity.
It hasn't been active. It is a required, as you see up top, this is a subcommittee that is required by Mass General Law. And oftentimes, we've been working with our food service company now for a number of years, so they would certainly be very active in any bids or that type of thing that, when we would go out for bid, for our food services, seeing as how we outsource that, we don't run our own. So certainly something that would happen there, and can have an active component with the food services over the year when necessary. So there are some examples where you could change menu items, those types of things. Last year, we actually had a student group. I think you were in that.
It was Miss Fry's sociology class, and there were students actively pursuing trying to change menu items for the cafeteria to adhere to student needs, or not needs, desires for what their menu should look like. But I know that they ran into a little bit of difficulty with that, whether or not they just whatever state regulations were with it. But I feel like that's why a student rep position could be beneficial.
So they keep an eye on kind of our food services, if you will. So it's not a committee that's met regularly over the past number of years, but something that probably should.
Mr. Chair, I remember when I was on the committee, this was before I think you were even here, Dad, we used to meet quarterly. And I think that if we are going to have one, that it might not be bad to have a student rep on it. I know when we were on it, one of the things that they tried was to feed the students whole wheat pasta, and that was a disaster. Because it was like eating cardboard, but it may not have gotten to the cafeteria had students had a voice on it at that time. So not a bad idea to have a student rep there.
So could we just make, Angelina, you can make the motion.
I was gonna ask if I can make motions in seconds, but I
Yes.
can't vote. I can?
Yes.
Okay,
You can't vote on it, but you can make the motion.
that's cool. Okay. I motion to add a student representative position on the wellness subcommittee.
Second.
We have a motion, Angelina's first, and a second to add a student representative to the Wellness Committee. Is there any discussion? The only discussion that I have is I'd like to ask to amend your motion to add another person to the Wellness Subcommittee, because looking very closely at our notes, we elected to assign two people to that subcommittee, Alicia and Karen. And so what's listed here is only one. So if you would be willing to accept a friendly amendment to your motion, we would add a student and a second school committee member.
Yes.
All right? So we have an amended motion. Do we have a second to the amended motion?
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? All right. Those in favor, Karen?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. The Wellness Center. The Wellness Subcommittee is passed with the amendments. We can look at the sick bank subcommittee and the collaborative representative, which is one definition for the CAPS and Keystone representatives, and perhaps any others, or if any of those collaboratives change their names, that will cover them. We can vote them through together, or we can discuss them or vote them separately.
Mr. Chair,
Karen?
may I make the motion that we vote them through together?
I'd second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? This motion is to vote through the sick bank subcommittee as written and the collaborative representative description as written.
I do have one question on the collaborative.
Yes.
We did, we have in the past anyway, we have, I guess the term would be, appointed the superintendent to be the representative to, I think, to CAPS,
To both of
and
them?
Keystone. Some years it's been the superintendent for both of them, and some years it's been just to one, and then a school committee member did the other one.
Right.
So, but this one here only allows or comments on a school committee member. Should we have some kind of language in case we want the superintendent to pinch hit?
So amend that?
Yeah, change the wording to a representative of the school committee.
I don't think the superintendent would be considered a representative of the school committee.
So how
Or
about?
designee, you could say.
Designee, I
Or
guess.
designee.
Okay. Yeah.
Designee?
So that would work,
Yeah.
yeah.
So looking at your collaborative representative write-up, the membership would change to, the representative shall be one member of the school committee, possibly including the chair and/or vice chair, or a member of the school system administration as appointed by the school committee?
Or a designee. You could just say or a designee.
Or designee.
Either way.
Okay, so the designee can be someone other than a school system administrator?
It's never going to be anybody but a school district administrator.
I wouldn't think so. but-
I wouldn't think so.
No. It's either going to be, it's most
It's
likely going to be the
us
superintendent.
attending or the superintendent. Yes, go ahead, Ms., I'm sorry. not-
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
if I may.
Sorry.
Just speaking on
Yeah.
whomever, currently sitting on both of those, just as a point of reference, both committees are made up of, one of the committees, either CAPS or Keystone, is primarily superintendents, with, I believe, 2 school committee members. The other collaborative is not quite the opposite, but it's maybe a 50-50 split between superintendents and school committee members. But
Yeah.
besides that, there are no other members that I'm currently aware of, just as a point of reference.
So,
We-
Mr. Chair,
We also, sorry.
couldn't we just say the representative shall be one member of the school committee or their designee?
Yes. We also need to change under requirements, where it says current Winchendon School Committee member. You can leave that, but, or,
All right, so the proposal is that the membership would be, the representative shall be one member of the school committee or their designee, and the elimination of the first bullet under requirements altogether.
Mr. Chair, if I may as well, the second bullet there references the bi-monthly meetings via Zoom. At some point, those will likely transition to in-person as well as they have been historically.
Okay, so we're striking via Zoom.
Or just,
or in person.
yeah, or just put a
Why don't-
slash in person.
or you could just say availability to attend bi-monthly meetings.
All right, so it sounds like we're at a good place with the collaborative. Are we ready to vote on the motion, which is to vote through the sick bank subcommittee and the collaborative representative as written with the amendments?
So moved.
All right.
Seconded.
And Greg?
Aye.
And Larry? Larry?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Ryan says yes, and we are unanimous.
Mr. Chair,
Karen?
may I make the suggestion and then maybe turn it into a motion that since our capital planning, I believe it is, and our town audit subcommittees technically
Those on.
only need representatives, we don't need to bring those back in the future?
Yeah, we're not doing them.
Because you had said that they were going to be left off because they were not fleshed out.
They're not ready for your review. They're not complete. They're incomplete.
Except for the town audit committee is just a representative, so we would not have a subcommittee. And the capital planning, we would not have a subcommittee for the school committee because we would just have a representative.
Yes.
Right.
So we
That's why-
don't need to bring those forward again. We don't need to define those because we don't need to have subcommittees for those.
I would disagree. I think we do need to define them, but we're going to define them as single representatives, not subcommittees.
Okay.
So we're going to bring back a definition for a single representative for
Because it gives the potential representative a chance to see what their responsibilities are
That
gonna
makes
be.
sense.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
That's better. Thank you.
All right. That is the end of our formal agenda. Any future agenda items? You don't have to know them right now.
So.
Maybe next meeting.
Okay, sounds
we're
good.
not going into executive session tonight?
No, I don't think so.
What
No.
about the,
There wasn't one on the agenda.
For what?
for the contract,
That's already
Contract.
been
with the
taken.
changes? So with the changes, we're all good?
Yeah, we voted on that
Yeah.
last meeting.
Voted on it last time.
We had to, if there were any significant changes that we needed to review? No?
No, we're voted through. They're
No,
just-
if you recall, they had agreed to those, so they had agreed to our attorney's changes before we
Okay,
did the vote
great,
last week.
great, that's all
We're
I
all-
needed
We're
to hear.
squared away.
All right, thank you.
So there is no executive session tonight. It sounds like there is no further agenda items right now.
If I could just add, we're going to put on illustrative math presentation coming from the leadership, the district leadership team will be putting forward an illustrative math presentation. We've referenced that in here multiple times, and we would like to present sort of in more detail what it actually is in terms of a math program. And then secondly, a program as well that we're running more from a social emotional perspective to provide counseling and therapy. Is a program called Care Solace that we're using in the district and is available not just to our students and staff, but can also be available to a greater audience across the town. So we would like to have Ms. Haru come and present on that program as well in one of the future meetings.
When are you going to?
We're going to do them both next meeting, Karen.
I will. Hey, you can do the math one then. Go for it. Do the math one next meeting.
We're gonna get so much done, Karen, while you're gone.
I'm telling you. I'm telling you. I'm telling you. Do
That
the math one.
agenda's gonna be this long.
Totally do the math one next meeting. Absolutely.
And you're gonna be voted in for so many
Everything.
committees. It's
I'm already
unbelievable.
on so many committees. It's okay. No, I would really like to, obviously.
One more item just to put on the long list for not next month, but in the near future, sometime in the near future, is an update on the ELA curriculum investigation.
Absolutely.
All right. Closing comments, we'll start with Karen.
I am looking forward to attending the mask conference, and if anything, I really would encourage you, once you look through these resolutions again, if you have any questions, including you, Angelina, please send them to me. I'm happy to, anything that I can't answer or get an answer to before the meeting, I will bring to them. If I do have the ability, I'm sure Larry knows this, but we can ask for an amendment, but I don't think that we're going to go that far, but I think if I can't get an answer before, I can probably find out an answer prior to the actual voting and let you guys know quickly. I
Okay.
can text you and get your okay, your yay or nay for the voting. So, and please do pay attention. I will give you the rundown on the agenda for when voting takes place so that you can know when to pay attention to me and when you can ignore me. Okay, Larry?
Okay. Larry? I just want to say how thrilled I am, Angelina, that you're willing to put in the time to be a part of this, because it's important for a student voice to be heard, and I'm totally impressed with the fact that you're willing to give up your time. I know you're in a lot of other things, and you're doing a million things. I just want to remind you that you have the same 24 hours that everybody else has. You don't have 26 or 28 hours, so be careful about how much you take on. But we're thrilled to have you. And I want to thank the principals tonight for their presentations. And I know they're all working hard. I know the teachers are working hard. And the focus. What I wanted to say to the principals was it was good to hear the commitment in their voices and the energy that they have towards making this right. They are determined to see improvement, and that's what we needed. We need people that are determined to see student growth. So I'm happy with that, and I want to thank them for that. That's it.
Greg?
Just want to echo some of what Larry said, first of all, regarding Angelina's commitment to being here. Thank you very much for that. And the same thing with the principals, but also by extension to the teachers. Whenever there's a presentation like this, and I hear how hard the staff is working on improving learning and teaching, I always ask myself, when are they actually finding the time to teach? Because they're putting so much time into this, into planning and the strategy groups and, you know, the numerous groups they've got together to work on improving the curriculum and improving learning skills. And it just amazes me. And I really hope that the community appreciates the hard work that our teachers do put in to their job. It's not an easy job. Teachers, in no stretch of the imagination, are overpaid. I don't care what anybody might say. They earn every penny of what they get, and probably deserve more. But I want to thank them, and I'll just close by saying I'm looking forward to bagging, distributing, and probably eating my fair share of popcorn at Memorial School tomorrow morning.
Good to know. Angelina?
I just want to say thank you, Greg and Larry. Of course, I'm excited to be here, and I hope that continued student participation in this position goes forward once I'm not here, because obviously in all the work that I do, you know, I think a lot of students who I've seen and am around all the time, they don't think that they have a position here, and they don't think that any of this applies to them, and it's just something that the adults will handle it, and they are obviously subject to what your decisions are. So when I was given the opportunity, I was more than happy, and I am more than happy to be here and actively participate. And I think that, you know, a lot of the stuff that we brought up today, I'm gonna take, and I'm gonna, you know, ask around and see what people's opinions are on things, and hopefully that I can accurately represent them as they should be. But yeah, just thank you. I'm excited to keep going here.
We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Thank you to the teachers and the principals for the data presentation tonight. Great work, a lot of room to improve, but also, just like Larry said, obviously the dedication is there, and we appreciate that. The alignment of learning from school to school is critically important. The new curriculum that is being brought in is critically important, and those scores can only improve, and we look forward to seeing that. It is nice to have the STAR data, which will be reported to us in a semi-regular basis, so that the school committee and the town's constituents can see how that progress is being made. So we're really looking forward to that. So thank you to everyone that presented tonight.
Chair.
Oh, yes, Karen.
Sorry, just real quick. I did want to thank Mr. King, I forgot earlier, for pointing out that all the data that we received was not about teaching to the MCAS test. I do think that's important as one of those parents that I very highly object to teaching to a test, and I think it's important that people know that we're not teaching our students to a test as much as we do need the data, and it is important. I think you made a very valid point, and I think you should make that into your signature, that, you know, that the MCAS will work itself out if we're teaching right. And also, I wanted to encourage all of my school committee members to order butter braids from Angelina, and you know, help with that fundraiser for the school. That's it.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn
Second.
and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned. Thank you.